its way through at times, and if you manage to see that and you get out of the breeze a bit, it won't feel too bad. Temperatures around 10 to 13 degrees Celsius for most of us. However, the cloud is going to build out towards the west later on in the day, initially for Northern Ireland, and we'll see some longer spells of rain arriving here into the evening. And that cloud and rain is slowly going to progress its way eastwards as we head into the overnight period. Turning quite damp and dreary for many of us. That rain heaviest out towards Western Hills, parts of Erie, the Pennines, getting quite a lot of rain into the start of Monday morning. But with all of that cloud, it's also filtering in some much milder conditions, so many of us will actually be starting off tomorrow morning in double-digit figures. But a lot of cloud on the scene. Those outbreaks of rain will be continuing, again heaviest for some western hills. If you are a little bit further towards the east, you might see a few glimmers of brightness and a touch more shelter. But those winds are going to be strong right across the board. Coastal gales in the most exposed regions. But still though, coming in from a southwesterly direction means those temperatures are going to be notably above average for the time of year. Most of us around 15 to 16 degrees Celsius. This unsettled and mild theme is looking to continue throughout a good portion of the forthcoming week as well. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
She's got a huge platform, so it really is wonderful that she's raised this issue.
Sandy, do you have any tips for parents who want to, keep screens out of the home? I find myself, as a parent, I'll be sort of Googling whether my son's development is right or whatever, or, Googling something about my son, and then I'll see that he's trying to play with me and I've been distracted by my phone. But I sort of have the best intentions, but I'm sure that's what everyone says. Do you have any tips for how to make phones and family more compatible?
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly for very young children, they don't really have a good concept of time. So to say to them, you can have the device for 20 minutes means nothing. So what I recommend to families that I work with is that they have screen-free places in the home where no one has a screen, and there are particularly important ones. So meal times, which the Princess of Wales raised yesterday, that's hugely important. It's a great time for the family to get together and talk. And also children being on screens during meal times has been shown to contribute to childhood obesity, because children don't register when they're full and they don't stop eating because they're distracted. The other really good place to avoid screens for everyone is the bedroom, particularly the children's bedroom, because it affects the quality of their sleep, how long they sleep. And first thing in the morning is particularly bad. It's been shown that children who watch screens in the morning have worse behaviour, attention and concentration throughout the day. And they're far more likely to have a speech and language problem.
GB News, the People's Channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show with me, Andrew Pearce. Continuing coverage of the horrific events in Huntingdon overnight. 10 people in hospital, with 9 in a life-threatening condition after multiple stabbings on a Doncaster to London train. A major incident has been declared, with counter-terrorism police now involved in the investigation. The Conservative MP for Huntingdon, Ben Objecti, spoke to GB News Breakfast.
The fact that a place like this, which is semi-rural Cambridgeshire, could be brought into scope of what is potentially a mass casualty incident, and we don't yet know the motive for the attack, but it is something that is incredibly serious.
We'll be talking to Labour MP for Booter Peter Dowd to react as we learn more about last night's events, which the Prime Minister described as appalling, saying his thoughts with all those who are affected. The Tory party chairman, Kevin Hollinrake, will be here too. We'll get his thought on what's unfolded overnight as we learn more about the incident. Stay tuned as we keep you up to date on this major, horrific attack on the train going into Huntingdon. Well, obviously politicians have been reacting to the mass stabbing in Huntingdon last night. The Prime Minister on Twitter said, "My thoughts with all those affected and my thanks go to the emergency services for their response. Anyone in the area should follow the advice of the police." The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, urged people not to speculate about the identity of the attackers, saying, "I'm deeply saddened to hear about the stabbings in Huntingdon. My thoughts go out to all those affected. 2 suspects have been immediately arrested and taken into custody. I'm receiving regular updates on the investigation." While Tory leader Kemi Badenoch said, "Deeply disturbed by the reports emerging from Huntingdon. This is an absolutely horrific attack. My thoughts with all those affected, including the emergency responders at the scene." And the leader of the Lib Dems, Sarah Davey, also tweeted, "Horrified by reports coming out of Huntingdon. My thoughts with those hurt and everyone who witnessed it. Thank you to the emergency services on the scene." And in the last hour, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has said, "The attack last night in Huntingdon was horrific. My thoughts with all the victims and their families. We need to know who committed these awful attacks as soon as possible." Well, joining us now live from Huntingdon is GB News national reporter Jack Carson. Jack, we understand there could be a press conference involving the police and emergency services as early as 10 o'clock this morning.
Yeah, that is right. We are expecting an updated statement from the British Transport Police in the next half an hour or so here at the scene. Of course, the last information we got from the British Transport Police was shortly after midnight, when they released a statement confirming that they'd been called to reports of multiple stabbings at 7:42 p.m. On a train from Peterborough. It was the 6:25 p.m. train service from Doncaster to London King's Cross. They say they immediately deployed officers to Huntingdon Station, and we know and saw from footage from social media, armed police from Cambridgeshire Police boarded the train service when it arrived here in the station and arrested 2 people in connection with the incident, who they say have been taken to police custody and we believe remain in police custody at this stage this morning. They also confirmed that 10 people had suffered injuries from this attack, 9 believed to have suffered life-threatening injuries. Again, this morning, no further update on that, with 1 person being treated for non-life-threatening injuries and no fatalities as of yet. But they did confirm, as you were saying, Andrew, that this has been declared a major incident, and counter-terrorism policing, they say, are supporting their investigation. That is very simply because we, at this stage, do not know a motivation. It's not been confirmed to us what kind of motivation there was for this attack. The Chief Superintendent of the British Transport Police, Chris Casey, said that this was a shocking incident, and first and foremost, their thoughts were with those who had been injured this evening. But they did confirm that they were conducting urgent inquiries, and we saw that overnight, both on social media, and I have seen it for myself in person this morning. Forensic officers, investigating officers last night on the train tracks, using torches to look under the train, to literally leave no stone unturned. That is not necessarily because there was anything confirmed to be under the train, but it is just how in-depth these investigations are going to ensure that the police are fully aware of exactly how, what, why this attack took place. And this morning we have seen forensic officers on site. I've seen forensic officers taking pictures of the scene, videoing the scene, and I'm kind of folding what appears to be some kind of black tarpaulin by a police van. That may well be used in the coming hours and days for the police to use to place items, incidents that they were, of course, recovered from the train, as those investigations continue here at Huntingdon Station.
All right, that's our national reporter, Jack Carson. Thank you so much. Joining me now is the former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office, Chris Phillips. Chris, good morning. It's a bleak, it's a grim morning.
Yeah, it's just becoming more and more normalised, this kind of incident, which is a sad indictment on our society, to be quite honest.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about, Chris, because a lot of people, millions of people use trains and tubes every day. They will need to know, don't they, that generally, most of the time, they're incredibly safe places to be.
Yeah, I mean, our society is incredibly safe. However, we are getting far more of these types of incidents. And yes, we don't know what the motivation is at the moment. And that's the key point as to whether this is terrorism or not. Why did this happen? But we are getting more and more of these types of serious incident using knives. And that's a big concern.
I don't wish to be unkind to the British Transport Police. I'm sure they do a great job and they're brave and heroic people. But I was talking earlier on the programme, I can't remember the last time I saw a British Transport Police officer on trains. Is it right that they don't routinely patrol them in the same way you don't see police officers routinely patrolling the beat? You have to alert them if you need them.
Well, no, they do patrol the train system. However, there are so few of them, and it's exactly the same for policing within this country. The police have been hollowed out to such an extent that there are just not enough of them available to give high visibility policing consistently. They can do it for short periods of time, but they can't do it consistency. And this is one of the biggest concerns for me, that at a time when we've got crime becoming much more difficult in many different ways, we have so few experienced police officers that are actually patrolling and showing a high visibility presence on our trains and in our cities. And that's really what the public have always wanted. They wanted bobbies on the beat. And what have we got? We've ended up with a fire brigade style of policing, which really no one ever asked for.
What we do know, the little we know about last night, is that the police were there very, very quickly and tackled the knifeman.
Yeah, absolutely. They did a fantastic job by the sounds of it. And listen, the police generally do a brilliant job. Let's be quite honest. They make mistakes like everyone else, but they, in response to these types of incidents, they are second to none. But we just need more of them, and that's not the police's fault. They have been starved of funding and resources for years, which has meant that we don't have the sort of policing that we've always wanted.
And just finally, Chris, don't we need more officers on the streets and fewer of them on our screens?
Absolutely. I mean, listen, the laws that they have to police are made by government. The politicians make the laws. The police officers are there to enforce the laws. Some of these laws completely crazy. We know that. What we want is high visibility community policing. We have always had that in this country until the last 10 years, and that's been taken away from us. And that's what we need to get back to.
All right, Chris, that's Chris Phillips, the former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. So I had to say, joining me in the studio is a very old friend, the former police director, the son, who is the founding partner at Shillings Communication, George Pascoe-Watson. George, we've got this press conference at 10 o'clock, or at some time soon anyway. Really important that there's clarity and transparency.
Well, information is the absolute key right now. You have a nation waking up to the headlines of this awful attack. And, of course, we send our condolences to all those people in hospital fighting for their lives and their families who must be beside themselves. But information is critical here. Lots of people want to know what happened, who is responsible, and what can be done to make sure that our train network is safe. And, of course, the police are riding two horses here. On one level, they need to reassure the public that they're taking all the steps necessary to protect the rail network. And on another level, which is very, very serious indeed, is that they're conducting a real-life crime inquiry for which they must gather evidence, which will be used in later court proceedings and prosecutions, and therefore they need to be painstaking. They need to be very meticulous in their investigation, but at the same time try and find out enough information that they can do that other job of reassuring the public. So 10 o'clock this morning, whatever the British Transport Police say, will be very, very important, and they will know the sensitivity of this.
And they will be very aware, George, of the scenes that unfolded after the terrible knife attacks which took the lives of those three lovely little girls in Southport, in the vacuum, because there wasn't enough information, we saw disturbances up and down the country.
Well, of course, social media, being what it is now, is rampant, and it's open to all sorts of manipulation by some people, by bots, by actors who have no interest in Britain's future. We've seen that happen before, the manipulation of news and fact, turning it into myth and disinformation is rampant in this day and age. And that is one of the things that's so important for the police to try and get out ahead of, whilst maintaining the security of a criminal investigation. And, of course, I would say, and you and I are sort of old news hands, that's the importance of news brands that people can trust to get their information from.
And the police, in these early hours of these sort of investigations, they have a number of things they have to achieve. Calm, but also they can't immediately jump to any conclusion about the perpetrator or the motives until they've absolutely established beyond doubt.
That's correct, and it has to be beyond doubt. And we are in a situation where you can imagine officers from last night will have been going through mobile phone records, identities, all sorts of things, because terrorism, if it was, some people think it might be a terrorist attack, has a very specific technical definition, and that's why it's hard to say. You can't say that until you're very, very clear. And I think the fact that the police used a particular process last night with all the emergency services coming in, which came up after the Manchester Arena bombing, that shows that was the kind of response to a major rolling terrorist exercise. Does not mean to say it was a terrorist event, but it was used by the police and emergency services. One of the other complicating factors here, of course, is also that you've got the British Transport Police and the police service, who are two sort of separate, distinct organisations who will have to work together. You can imagine, of course, a train attack. You know, the train is going through several police forces during its journey, and that adds an extra layer of bureaucratic complication as well.
The pressure now for the government to put a stronger police presence on the streets, whether it's at our stations, our tube stations, our bus stations, is going to grow and grow, because, as our last guest said, these attacks are becoming more commonplace, and if there is a police presence, that surely is a deterrent.
Well, it's definitely the case that a deterrent is where we see visible, obvious signs of real people, real detectives, real officers, real high-vis, and that definitely makes people feel much more reassured on our streets. And there will be pressure on our politicians, and it's going to be a challenge for the Home Secretary, the Prime Minister and others this morning, and I know you'll be talking to some of these ministers in due course. They can't really take a very strong line on this until they themselves know what's gone on here. But there certainly will be pressure on the Home Secretary to increase visible policing. Of course, it's not her job. It's the police chief's job to make operational decisions about visibility on the streets. She can command and direct, but she can't tell them what to do.
That's George Pascoe-Watkins, who's staying with me. I'm going to talk now to Peter Dowd, who is the Labour MP for Bootle. Peter Dowd, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Horrible, bleak, terrible morning.
Absolutely shocking. I just can't begin to describe how the families and people affected by this must be feeling. It's just horrific, absolutely horrific.
Do we need to see, I'm not making a party point here, Peter Dowd, do we not need to see more police officers on the beat? It's a cliched expression, but on the beat at our police stations, at our tube stations, because frankly, I never see any of them.
Well, it's interesting you say that. In my area in Liverpool, we've just introduced more neighbourhood policing. As a matter of fact, we have a new team in my area. And I think that sort of presence on the street actually does reassure people. So in short, yes, I agree that we do need more neighbourhood policing. The people who are connecting with communities is, police officers and community support officers connecting with communities is really important. And I know that's something we have already started in Liverpool.
And the worry is because, of course, we were talking earlier to some people who work in the counter-terrorism field, and we don't know if it is terrorism yet. Peter, but the worry is that people think, I can't go on a train, I can't go on a tube. They're not safe places, but they are.
Yes, and I completely understand people's concerns about that, and I think that's where it's important that in the light of events such as this, that inevitably the government and the British Transport Police and the police more generally and the security service or whoever needs to be involved in this will do that review, but it's a review that needs to be acted upon as soon as practically possible, because perception for people is reality. Yesterday we had 9 people stabbed, with 10 people stabbed with life-threatening injuries. That is absolutely crucial, that we do send a message of confidence out to people that yes, it is safe to travel.
Yeah, and the Home Secretary, of course, will get strong words from her, but it has to be followed up, doesn't it, with visible action, Peter?
Of course, it has to be followed up with visible action, and that's people take thousands, there are tens of thousands of train journeys every year. Clearly, I use the train going to London every week there and back. I use local trains, etc. And people have just got to be reassured that if they're in an environment, whatever the environment is, whatever the public environment is they're in, because a train is a public environment at the end of the day. If they're in a public environment, I think that they have to feel reassured with the presence of the police or community support officers or British Transport Police. It's in a sense not for me to say how that should be done. I think that's for the professionals in line and in collaboration and coordination with, if you're politicians, local politicians, national politicians. How do we want to deal with that? How will that practically look? And how do we find and where do we find the resource to do that from?
Peter, when we booked you, we were going to talk to you about the budget. If I could just ask you about the budget, because that is coming up on November the 26th. It's going to be a very difficult budget by all accounts. It's quite clear, isn't it, that if the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, who's got all sorts of other difficulties to contend with, if she's going to make spending cuts, she's going to have to. The police are going to have to be immune from any austerity.
Well, I don't. I mean, number one, we always say this, don't we? Let's see what Rachel Reeves produces on the 26th of November, which is budget day. But look, no one is pretending that we haven't got a challenging political environment, a challenging economic environment, and a challenging, as they call it, a fiscal environment. A public expenditure environment. No one's beginning to pretend that doesn't exist. And I think Rachel Reeves has got a hard job in squaring all those various circles and all the various demands from people, whoever they may be, whether that be businesses, whether that be employees, employers. There's a real challenge to the public finances, and she's got a pretty big job to do. And trying to reassure all those different interests will take a lot of doing, to be quite honest.
Just finally, Peter, she's also got pressure, hasn't she, still over the fact she omitted to have a licence when she rented out her constituency home in South London. So we've got a chance of the Exchequer has broken the law.
Well, I think either way, she took professional advice, and that professional advice potentially, I don't know the details of this to be fair, she took professional advice, as you would from a lawyer, an accountant, whoever it might be, in this case, someone who helps you license or helps you to let your house out. I think you take the advice from experts, and if those experts don't give you the advice, appropriate advice, or don't take the action that they're supposed to take, which I think they've acknowledged they didn't, that is a problem. But that could be happening to anybody, to be fair. So I don't think it's just about Rachel Reeves. I think it's about the principle of, if you take advice from a professional, you expect that advice to be spot on. And if it isn't, as Rachel Reeves has found out, she's facing all sorts of challenges, which is regrettable.
Will she still be Chancellor when it comes to the budget?
I believe she will still be the Chancellor when she comes to the budget, and I think this has to be put into that sort of context in relation to the advice that she was given.
All right, that's Peter Dowd. He is the Labour MP for Bootle. Still got George Pascoe-Watson with me. The news, you and I, old newspaper men, the front pages are all done last night, and then this breaks mid-evening, and extraordinary how quickly some front pages, for instance, The Sun, train stab attack horror up to 12 night in Rampage. Not much time. A lot of it, of course, goes online immediately.
It's a real challenge to get an accurate, fast report into the newspaper, and particularly on the Sunday newspapers, of course, because the Sunday newspapers have spent the whole previous week pulling together exclusive stories, real in-depth stories about issues of the day. And not only do you have to get your reporters who've all gone home now and sort of relaxing for their days off. Their weekend starts on a Saturday night. But you've also got to think, which stories am I going to junk from the front page that I've planned meticulously for commercial readers, so our readers will get the best news for that week. And that's got to be junked, and they're going to be moved to another page in the paper. So there's a lot of rearranging going along in the newsrooms last night. And of course, some of the newspapers didn't change up their editions. Some of them did, and I think that relates sometimes to how many, what was the option in the newsroom of the time? Did we have human beings in and around to be able to do this? But, you know, what is certainly true is the story now has driven lots of the other news agenda stories. You were talking just now about the Chancellor. There's obviously the budget coming up. There's the whole royal crisis going on. There's loads of other stories which will now not be examined in today's rolling news stations like ourselves because we're focusing on this really, really critical story. And of course, this does matter. This matters to the hundreds of thousands, millions of people who commute on trains every day, and everybody will be thinking, what's to stop this happening again?
Yeah. And that's how we've got a press conference coming up in the next 10, 15 minutes. The police have to give some reassurance. It has to be reassurance from the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary.
Yes, and I advise people on their crisis response in terms of a communications perspective. And the most important thing is not to go quiet and not to go absent, because that's when speculation and rumour and myth begin to mushroom.
As we saw in Southport.
As we saw in Southport. And that leads to human beings taking decisions sometimes into their own hands, which creates another ongoing problem. So it's very important to communicate. Even if you don't have the answers to people's questions, people will still be more reassured that you're prepared to be open, present, but communicating this is complex and it's difficult, and we will come back and communicate
and all
regularly.
the more important after the horrors of what happened in Huntington, because people speculate on social media, and some people read stuff on social media, think it must be true. And then journalists like me get saying, why are you covering it up? Why aren't you telling the truth? Well, we have to wait for the truth. And that's why this press conference is going to be so important when it comes this morning.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. And speculation is something that newspaper and news organisations are well aware of, but have to make a responsible judgment. The whole point about news is power with responsibility in this day and age. And it's very important not to add to the sense of concern that people have, not to terrify people unnecessarily, but to make sure that it's done in a mature and professional way, and when we've got absolute certainty, we can publish and we can let you know. And lots of people, of course, are thirsty for the news. Of course they are. We're all thirsty for the news. We want to know the facts. But right now, the facts are we have 2 individuals in custody, and the police are going through a forensic investigation to establish who they are, what lay behind whatever they've done. Is there a motive that they can detect so quickly? Ministers will be being advised similarly, and as soon as it's safe to pass that information to a worried public, then I think it will be done.
I'm talking to George Pascoe-Watson, former police head of The Sun. What's your posh title now?
I am partner at Shillings Communications.
Which you launched. You and I have covered big press conferences like this before, and it's going to, we hope they will tell us everything there is to be known about the suspects, because we can even call them suspects at the moment, of course, but also the motive, and also there will be, I'm sure, George, questions about how often do we see on our trains a presence from the British Transport Police? I'm not criticising British Transport. They have their strategy, their tactics. I don't think there's enough of them because you don't see many of them. And that's going to be, and I think that will become an issue as this story develops.
I think police presence remains an issue, full stop, in this country, because in a world where some individuals are motivated to do this kind of, whether it's planned or random attack, is a real thing that we all have to live with in this day and age. And to a certain degree, the world that we live in is fraught with danger. We've seen lots of attacks over the years. It is important, I think most people think the police presence is very, very important, but you have to say there is, and colleagues have said this already on your commentary, there are not enough police officers to provide that visibility that we would like everywhere.
It used to be the Tory party was seen as tough on crime, the party of law and order. I still remember Theresa May going to the Police Federation, the Home Secretary, saying, you don't need all these police officers, axing 20,000. And while the last lot say they replaced them, it was made very experienced officers left, and by definition, inexperienced, untrained people coming in.
Well, there's definitely a recruitment issue here where thousands of police officers are lining up to retire or leave the service, not even retire, but leave the service after a few years in, having had all the training and the expertise and that sort of valued judgment that comes with a more senior officer. And they are being replaced by really well-motivated recruits, I know that, but it takes a bit of time, obviously, for them to get that judgment and that learning. And that is one of the challenges. And, of course, people say that you can't really afford to be a police officer in this day and age and have family and kids and all the rest of it, because salaries have not kept up with inflation, and that is one of the challenges. But, you know, right through today's Sunday newspapers, there is commentary about the challenge that the Chancellor faces in her budget in 3 weeks' time, precisely because Britain has now got greater debt than any other major rich country in the world, and we are living beyond our means. And we have been living beyond our means for the last 20 years. The stats show that since 2005, so 20 years ago, Britain's accelerated in its debt. We're paying £100 billion a year. If you say it quickly, it doesn't mean anything. That's, you know, £10 billion a month on debt interest alone. It doesn't buy anything, it's just paying interest.
It's shocking.
We cannot keep doing that. But you can't just tax people, you have to stop spending so much. And spending includes spending on the police
bread and butter
service.
Issues.
And so, you know, it's a dilemma any way you go.
And it's also about the priorities, I'm afraid, of chief constables, because we have, 45, is it 46 police forces up and down the country. Every police officer has tasers. Some police forces, they don't use tasers at all. Astonishing. I would have every police officer with a taser, everyone.
Well, and we may see police changing as a consequence of today's incident. Certainly, it's very comforting when people see that the police are changing tactics, but it's not for me or us to tell the police how to do their job. But it is certainly the case that it is the chief constables who are in charge of the responsibility of policing.
I'm talking to George Pascoe-Watson. He is former political editor of The Sun and he's founding partner of Schillings Communications. We're going to be going to Huntingdon very soon. There's going to be a press conference with various people involved in the extraordinary knife attacks on that train going for the London North Eastern Railway train. It was going from Doncaster to London, and somewhere between Peterborough and Huntingdon, hell broke out. That's all you can describe. These 5 or 6 minutes when 2 knife men ran amok and rampaged. They are both in custody. 10 people have been hospitalised. 9 of them have life-threatening injuries. So our thoughts are with the families, and we're hoping and praying that they pull through. And of course, George, a big test as ever for our emergency services, and the police were there so quickly.
Well, I have to say, the police did an amazing job last night, both the British Transport Police and local police. They were there within minutes of this episode unfolding, and that is a fantastic comfort. And can you imagine being on that train that some passengers said they thought it was some Halloween horror party that was going on, until they realised it was real blood and a real disaster, and we had the obviously paramedics on scene and other emergency services. So thank the Lord for those guys. They do a brilliant job day in, day out. They're the ones who are on the front line. They run towards danger.
They do.
And we must never forget that. They're so precious, and we want to make sure that they get the the protection that they need in their job.
And when I say that there's not enough police officers, that's not a criticism of the police or the job they do. There's just not enough of them. That's decisions that have been taken by successive governments, and the operational decisions to have too many of them, in my view, George, policing the net rather than being out there in the community. Again, they're operational decisions taken by people on much higher salaries and no doubt with very big posh degrees.
And also, those people are responding to laws set in Parliament by our members of Parliament, who are directing, on behalf of our viewers, of we the voters, what they think we want our policing to be. And so it's ultimately, like all these things, like the tax, it all comes down to Parliament. It all comes down to whether the laws have been set correctly, which then guide the police chiefs and others to carry out things operationally.
I remember the Father Tedworth, one of the thing I found most shocking was not the fact he was arrested over the tweets, which was something to do with the trans community, but the fact that 4 armed officers detained him at one of our airports. 4. A middle-aged man. What the hell?
Yes, and who knows? I mean, we're not there to monitoring the policing operational decisions, but they would have taken decisions based on a book of instructions that they have to follow, and they know they're going to be carrying out these sort of orders. But it seems overkill, and I'm sure there are lots of police officers there who feel the same way as you do.
Yeah, we're expecting to go to Huntingdon Live very shortly because we're going to have a press conference there. If you're just tuning in for the first time, there was a serious knife attack on the London North Eastern Railway line between Peterborough and Huntingdon. 10 people are in hospital, 9 of them have life-threatening injuries. The 2 suspects, we have to call them that, are in police custody. There's no motive being given yet, but we are going to get this press conference very shortly, in which we imagine the police will tell us, well, they'll tell us everything they know, and they will be, I presume, George Pascoe-Watson, that they will take questions. Sometimes they just make a statement and walk away.
Sometimes it's purely a statement, and that reflects that it's less reassuring if you can't give details and you can't answer questions. It looks like you're being evasive. And so that's an important part of the theatre here, is if they are able to take questions, it suggests they know a lot more. I suspect this time in the morning, after such a big attack, I suspect they probably won't take questions, and they'll just merely give a statement at this stage of reassurance.
And of course they need to give us a statement because they are we're very conscious of what happened after Southport. They need to be transparent because social media can be a poisonous vacuum.
And it can be very, very dangerous. It can be misleading, and it's open to manipulation. That was the other thing we saw in Southport, that Russian bots were set up over time and encouraged to create an atmosphere. And so it's very important that the police do what they can to keep the vacuum in some way filled with some information which is official.
Yeah, exactly. We've heard statements from the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, the Leader of the Opposition. We were supposed to be talking about the first anniversary today of Kemi Badenoch. We're talking to Kevin Hollinrake, who was the Conservative Party chairman at some point, but these schedules disappear when we have terrible events like this. Her first anniversary was this week. Hasn't gone that well, has it?
Well, she would say, if she was here, and I'm sure she would say to you, that this was never going to be an overnight success. Mrs. Thatcher, she would say, took a long, long time, and we forget now in history, but a long time to sort of get on top and create the fantastic impression that she ultimately created for herself. And she wasn't expecting an overnight success. She would also accept, and I think she has said, that this has not run as smoothly as she would have liked. She has to create national recognition. She has to create a profile which people recognise and understand. She is also in a world where the political world has fragmented into so many different parts that it's hard for her to get heard. I think there was a turning point probably a couple of months ago at her party conference, 6 weeks ago now, where she took a much harder line and came up with much more clear policies. And I think the specific thing she did, which I agree with, was for them, which was to focus on the economy. If the Conservative Party is known for anything, you mentioned law and order before, true, but actually the economy is the thing that could be her winning ground, even though the last Conservative governments, plural, didn't exactly do us a favour. But I would say that was largely down to the cost of COVID. Nobody can spend that kind of money without it being about 100 years to fix, and many generations, and we weren't really, nobody ever took the steps to tell us that and to persuade us of that, and so our expectations are way out of kilter with what can be afforded in this country. And so I think that the Conservative Party under Kemi Badenoch, if it can focus on the economy with any convincing policies, will be good, because the government, the Labour government, is going to have to struggle with the economy. And of course, if you're in opposition, it's easy to throw rocks at people who are struggling.
That's George Pascoe. So we're going to go back to Huntingdon, where we are expecting this press conference to start shortly. But first, we're going to talk to GB News national reporter Jack Carson. Jack, hello to Jack. So we're expecting this press conference
Andrew.
quite shortly.
We are expecting that.
Sure.
Yes, we are. 10 o'clock is the time that we've been given, of course. These things never really run on time, but we are expecting that update from the British Transport Police. Of course, the last statement we got was shortly after midnight last night. So there is as you've been talking about on your show this morning, there is this vacuum becoming of information. Of course, not only information on those that we know have been taken to hospital. We know that 9 were taken to hospital with what were called life-threatening injuries. 1 with a non-life-threatening injuries. Of course, many people wanting updates on those people that are involved in this attack, and very much also an update on those 2 people that the British Transport Police confirmed that they had taken into custody. Of course, in that statement, they said that they were called to reports of a multiple stabbing on a train at 7:42 p.m. last night, saying that the 6:25 train service from Doncaster to London's King Cross had that attack taking place on it shortly. From eyewitness accounts, we believe that attack started shortly after the train left Peterborough Station. It was not due in here at Huntingdon. It came here as part of a emergency stop in order for police to board the train. And armed police, we know from Cambridgeshire Police, boarded that train and arrested 2 people in connection with the incident. They, of course, remain in police custody, and that's the information we have so far. This, of course, has been declared a major incident, and counter-terrorism police are actively involved in this incident. That is simply because at this stage we do not know the motivation. Now, that is something which people will be looking for from this press conference. Can the British Transport Police in this press conference confirm any idea of motivation? Have they had a chance to speak to those 2 people that they arrested and took into custody? Have they had a chance to speak to them? Are they able at this stage to confirm any kind of motivation, and are they able to declare this a terrorist incident? This is all questions which many people will want to be asking, wondering, of course, whether these will be answered in this press conference in a few minutes' time. The Chief Superintendent, Chris Casey, to bring you up to date with the latest comments we've got from him, which firstly that he called this a shocking incident, but also that he of course said that they were conducting urgent inquiries, and they said last night that it could take some time before they were in a position to confirm anything further. You wonder therefore whether with this press conference in the next few moments or so, whether that time has now passed and whether they do have something further to say. An update here, of course, at Huntingdon Station is where we expect at that press conference to take place, and we heard from eyewitnesses just how horrific the attack on the train was. Talks of people running as fast as they could through the train to the furthest carriage away from where those attacks were taking place. We've already heard these heroic stories of people trying to get away, trying to get in the way of other people that were being attacked, particularly reports from eyewitnesses of an older man who tried to get in the way of a little girl that was being attacked on that train, and reports of people in that final carriage when they got to that final carriage and realised that they could go no further, trying to find anything that they could possibly use, not knowing what was going to confront them as they through those last train carriage doors. But of course, that is when the train pulled into Huntingdon Station, and those armed police officers were able to board it and as we know, take 2 people into custody. The reaction, of course, has been widespread, not only from, of course, the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, Camilla, but also from local MPs here as well. Of course, we know that Operation Plato was issued on the back of those 999 calls, and for those people that don't know, Operation Plato is the UK's national police protocol for responding to what's called a marauding terrorist attack. So that essentially is a no-notice attack which has a high threat to life. So that was issued as part of the standard protocol when those police were responding to this incident. And we know just from the emergency response, not only from the police and of course those armed response teams being involved, but also from the East of England Ambulance Service, knowing just this kind of resources that they were able to deploy, really, I'm sure had an impact on those people that have now been taken to hospital.
All right, Jack, that's Jack Carson, our GB News national reporter. With me in the studio, I'd like to say, is Kevin Hollinrake, who is the Conservative Party chairman. We're here to talk about the unbridled, triumphant success of Kemi Badenoch's first year as Tory leader, Mr Hollinrake. Instead, I must ask you about the terrible events on that train. We don't know yet the motive.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally shocking. For the people on that train last night, it must have been in sheer panic.
It's the worst nightmare, isn't it?
Oh, my God, terrible, terrible. In a confined space, and you've got this marauding individuals, just unthinkable and devastating for the people who are directly affected, all their families, of course. But anybody who's on that train will have suffered psychological trauma. So, fantastic job apparently by the train driver and by the emergency services, of course, and obviously we're all keen to hear exactly what happened and why, and so it's important we don't speculate until that point in time. But yes, but life's got to go on. You can't let these people win. I think that's the message I would give.
The worry is that people think, oh God, I can't go on a train, I can't go on a tube. You can, because they are safe places. Yeah. But I would say, Kevin Hollinrake, on the Tory watch, Tory government cut police numbers by 20,000. Now, I know they were restored, but they're not experienced officers. That was, in hindsight, a terrible mistake.
Yeah, it was. I agree. It was a mistake, and I think we thought we could control crime by other means. And when police numbers came down, crime didn't rise. And I thought, we're clearly, you're trying to protect public money. That's what you're trying to do. But it was a mistake. That's the reality. And we, as you say, we restored those numbers. They're actually above the numbers that were prior to those cuts, and we've now said we'll increase those numbers again by 10,000 more, and we need those police officers to be visible.
And should every one of them have a taser? Because it's up to a chief constable. Some forces have them, some don't. Some officers don't want to carry them. But what police officers run into the danger while we run away from it? Yeah. Shouldn't they at least have a taser?
Well, I'm not experienced in terms of operational policing, but that sounds eminently sensible to me. I mean, any police officer could have been facing that situation yesterday, and to go there just without something like a taser would be really unthinkable. So you need to be able to act in those situations. So that would seem perfectly sensible to me. Other things we need to do to stop knife crime, whatever the motivations behind this incident, we need to clamp down on knife crime, and things like stop and search. We've committed to bring that back. That's
you went wobbly on that too.
Yeah, that's a political correctness, and it shouldn't have happened. We've got to make sure people feel safe. It's our first duty, national security, the security of our citizens, our first duty. We made mistakes. There's no doubt about it. But, from my view, that's why I chose Kemi Badenoch as being the person to lead our party, because she's strong, she's uncompromising. There won't be any political correctness that'll get in the way of doing the right thing, and that's exactly the kind of leader we need.
So police on the streets, not on the screens.
Absolutely right. And in these days of AI, of course, we can make sure should make sure they're doing less admin and spending more time out on the streets. That should certainly be happening.
Kevin Hollinrake, if I had a fiver for every Home Secretary
absolutely.
For the last 20 years, 25 years, said, we're going to cut the paperwork, we're going to cut the admin, I'd be a millionaire.
Yeah.
It never happens. They get more, not less. What is it about
We've
this?
got to be disciplined about this. So last week, when they released their prisoner, the one that had carried out that atrocious crime, and but on the back of that, we saw the Home Secretary come along and say, OK, every single release of any prisoner in the UK now, you're going to fill in this 3-page form. I mean, we react to these kind of incidents with a huge amount of bureaucracy, which will be counterproductive in terms of these people being able to do their jobs. It's counterproductive to take people who are doing the admin, the back office, and I've heard that from police officers. Yeah. We've got to make sure the police officers' time is gainfully used out on the streets, policing the streets, and making sure they're there and they're deterring crime that way, but also there to attend those incidents when they happen. That's what we've got to do. I accept the fact we've got these things wrong in the past. We need to learn from that, and I think that's what I like about Kimmy. She's direct. She knows what she wants, and I don't think this kind of political correctness or these kind of the buffeting you get inevitably in government will knock her off course.
I did say at the start you were here to talk about her triumphant first year in the polls, in which she's managed to take the Tories from their worst ever election result. I think we're on about 25, 26%. You're now down to 17%. Congratulations. That's gone well, that last year, isn't it?
Got a lot of work to do, but Kemi's not the kind of person who's going to come in and just tell people what they want to hear. There's two routes you can take in politics. You can just be the populist and tell people what they want to hear and rush all your policies out, all headline policies, and then you can't deliver them. What Kemi wants to do is make sure the policies we announce you can deliver upon. And that's why it has been quieter than normally you would see with a new leader. You see some leaders come in of all different political stripes and they make all kind of promises they just can't keep. So what we've spent that time doing, what Kemi spent that time doing, is making sure we develop policies properly that are affordable. So we announced the stamp duty cut, of course, at conference, but we can only pay for that by welfare reform. And we've got a proper plan about how you reform welfare. That takes time to deliver. But now we're in a position where there should be a drumbeat of policy announcements, where we make sure people understand exactly what a Conservative Party running this country would mean. We make sure that we are front and centre, the value-led party that we've always been, which we lost sight of. But Kemi's doing those things right. If you saw after conference, the announcement on small boats, on leaving the European Convention on Human Rights and other legislation we need to change so we can protect our borders, all those things we announced at conference. So we've got the stronger borders, but crucially a stronger economy, making sure we reform welfare. We limit the welfare spending. In fact, we reduce it. We're the only party who say we'll do that. I mean, you've got other parties, all the other parties.
Though, did you?
Sorry?
You didn't really do it very much when you were in government.
Well, we did so, of course. We got heavily criticised for austerity. We balanced the books after 2010. It took a decade to do it, so we did constrain public spending, but welfare did balloon after COVID. And now we need to, of course, these things happen in politics, things change, and we need to react to that change. So we're the only party that's right of centre now on public spending. That's what people have got to see. Every other party wants to do things like scrap the 2-child limit on benefits. We do not. We want to constrain public spending. So a stronger economy, stronger borders. That's our tagline, if you like, our slogan, and we're going to meet the promise that is contained within that strap line.
You haven't said stop the boats.
Well, stronger borders, we have said.
Okay.
And that, I mean, to be fair, the plan we had in the last Parliament was along the right lines. It was return, it was detention, it was deportation. That's what it was. We were stopped 134 times by the Labour and the Lib Dems and the Greens and all these people and the House of Lords and the courts. But that's why we've said now we'll do that again, all those things again. But this time we'll just coming out the European Convention on Human Rights, because that would be a blockage to what we need to do in terms of small boats. So we will solve that problem, and we have looked at this properly, and we've taken the time to look at this. We've got Lord Wolfson to do a report into this, saying what legislation we need to protect our borders. It's not just our borders as well, of course, that legislation. It means we'll be able to give British people the first choice over things like social housing and benefits. So we'll be able to protect our veterans from malicious prosecutions, because that's a terrible state of affairs. All these things will be enabled through our departure from the European Convention on Human Rights.
Can I just ask you one last thing before I let you go? Because before you were MP, you were an estate agent.
I was.
So you would know a little bit about the difficulties our Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, is experiencing because, as you know, the Mail on Sunday revealed last week she's broken the law because she's renting out her home £3,000 a month without the proper licence. She told the Prime Minister and the ethics investigator she didn't know she needed a licence. Whoops! 24 hours later, some emails came to saying not only did she know, but her husband, a very senior civil servant, was discussing this with the estate agency, but they never followed it through to check whether the licence had been obtained on their behalf. Mail on Sunday says today she was told by a second firm of estate agents they had to have the licence. If you were an estate agent, do you see commonplace that a reputable estate agent would tell the homeowner, you need the licence, but we'll get it for you? Or would it be up to them to get it themselves?
It's up to the responsibility stays with the landlord. You can't abdicate your responsibility, even if you delegate the responsibility. You can ask somebody to do it, but you've got to make sure it's done. Yeah. And she didn't. But I think where Rachel Reeves is really in trouble here is her changing version of events. So she said initially she didn't know. Then she realised, because the emails surfaced, that she did know, or her husband knew, her and her husband knew, and now it appears she was told twice. So Rachel Reeves, when she was in opposition, she was always calling for people's resignation.
She said Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, had to resign because he had a bit of cake.
Because he broke the law and lied about it. I'm sorry, Rachel. You've broken the law and you've given a false account twice. Right. Now, we're not the kind of people who just jump to calling for somebody's resignation, but there should be a full investigation. What's happened so far is the Prime Minister and the independent advisor to ministerial standards have both just taken her word. That's wrong. There should be a proper investigation.
All right, that's Kevin Holland-Hake. He is the Conservative Party Chairman. Thank you so much, Judge. I want to go. We're talking about this terrible attack on the train. 10 people in hospital, 9 with life-threatening injuries after 2 knifemen ran amok on that train. Let's talk to police commentator Graham Wetton. Graham, we are going to get this press conference quite soon. It's vital, isn't it, that the police fill the vacuum very quickly and give as much information as they can because, as you know, on social media, people speculate and they often get things horribly wrong.
Yeah, morning, Andrew. Yeah, that is essential. And they've had all night now to try and gather the information, corroborate it with the eyewitnesses, possibly even some of the victims. Bear in mind that I think none of them would have been undergoing emergency medical treatment overnight, maybe even if they've spoken to the suspects at an early stage this morning, but just trying to establish the motives, the why this happened. And if that confirms it was a terrorist motivation, then announce it as such. They've had the counter-terror command involved at a very early stage, which is normal practice and very prudent to have them from an early stage, because then if it becomes a terrorist investigation, they just stay with it. If they can downscale it and it isn't, the motivation wasn't terrorism-based, then they just hand it over to serious crime detectives. So, but it is clear that we get some clarity and some facts at an early stage this morning.
And Graham, what's undeniable is how quickly the police were there and how brave they were, running straight into the danger.
Yeah, it was very, very quick response. My understanding, the emergency alarm was activated on the train. The driver did exactly the right thing. Obviously, notified his control room. He was diverted or directed into Huntingdon Station towards the platform, because my understanding that train would normally come through the middle of that station on the fast line, but they've diverted him very quickly, very, very swiftly onto the platform or towards a track next to the platform. Police were there waiting for them. My recollection of Cambridge, and I worked there a few years ago on a policing deployment, I think Cambridgeshire Police HQ is literally just a minute or two away from Huntingdon Station. So if that's where they were based, they obviously reacted very quickly, Cambridgeshire Police. Armed officers then met the train. The police declared Operation Plato type response, which is a marauding terror type attack. That doesn't mean it's a terrorist attack. That's just the operational response at a very early stage. That means firearms officers confront the threat and the risk, and unarmed officers and other emergency personnel like paramedics and the ambulance crews, etc., wait in a safe place until the officers can deal with the threat, neutralise the threat, restrain the people, as they did with the two suspects, and then the other officers and emergency service personnel come onto the platform and help the members of the public.
Graham, always when these things happen, there is a clamour then, why don't we see more police officers? Why is there not a bigger presence in the community, at railway stations, tube stations? People who would make that point have got a legitimate point, haven't they? We do not see enough police officers. I'm not criticising the police officers. No. It's decisions taken much higher up.
Yeah, it is, and you speak to officers themselves. You know, I was a sergeant in the Met. The admin I dealt with is nothing like what they have to deal with today. They sometimes don't even get to leave the police station because the amount of spreadsheets and admin that they are dealing with. Officers on the street, when you make an arrest these days, that's you off for the whole shift because the amount of documents and admin that you have to complete for each single arrest. I need to commend your last guest, Kevin. I didn't catch your surname, but it's the first Conservative I've heard admit it was a mistake to reduce police numbers. I've been clamoring that for years, and as many other people, that it was a massive mistake to reduce the police. I think it was Mrs. May who said, crime's down, so we need less police officers. Well, clearly that hasn't worked. But what policing faces now is a retention crisis as well, because those in the service aren't staying as long as I did, 30 years. They're leaving after 5 or 10 years. You're getting this, and again, this was asked for, constant churn of workforce. Policing is based on experience. You are learning every single day that you are working as a police officer. Officers, as we saw, reacted and responded ever so quickly last night. That's based on their knowledge and experience as a police officer. So it's essential we keep our experienced officers working on the streets for us and getting more of them out onto the streets to protect the public.
All right, Graham, thank you so much for joining us. That's the police commentator, Graham Wetton. Well, delighted to join me now is Dame Andrea Jenkins. She's the Reform UK Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire. Dame Andrea, good morning to you.
Morning, Andrew. It's horrific, isn't it, what's happened last night?
It is horrific, and obviously your thoughts, my thoughts are with the families,
yes.
But also the police did an extraordinary job.
Yeah, true heroes. I mean, as your previous guest has just said, it's obviously experienced policemen who attended the event, and well done to the driver as well. But like you said, the victims, I mean, I don't know if you've looked online, you probably haven't had a chance this morning. There's some eyewitness accounts of how they was running through the carriages. It's only a small carriage. It wasn't a very long carriage. And there's putting the hands on the chairs. The hands were getting covered in blood from people who'd been stabbed. And there was another hero guy who tried to protect this young girl. And what they must have gone through, Andrew, it beggars belief, doesn't it, really? And I think what people need, the public need, they need reassurance that this is not going to happen again. We need complete facts about what's happened. We don't want any information hidden. The most important thing is to be honest with the public and to put measures in place.
And that's the problem, isn't it, Dame Andrea? Because people have to use the train to go to work. Yes. In my view, far too many people work from home now. And that's had all sorts of impacts. And people need to use the tube as well. And we don't want them to think, I can't go on a train because they're no longer a safe place.
Absolutely. I mean, it takes you back to 7/7, doesn't it, in a way? People on public transport and how that left the country feeling then. And I just pray that these 9 people survive, actually. But one thing I want to make sure we're all calling for this, no doubt, that unlike what happened in August last year, we want complete transparency this time. Yeah. The public deserve to know, don't they, of what's truly happened as quick as possible, and to make sure measures are in place to protect the British public, because no doubt there's a lot of frightened people out there.
Yeah, and that's the problem, isn't it, Dame Andrea? Because of Southport, that for days there was a lack of information. We needed information, and then, of course, some people took the law into their own hands, which is never a good idea.
No, absolutely. Completely agree with you, Andrew.
What of the fact about the police? I mean, can you, as Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire, tell your Police and Crime Commissioner or tell the Chief Constable you want to see more police officers visible in the community?
I mean, I can ask. I think the key issue is, though, that Lincolnshire's been severely underfunded for consecutive governments. I mean, if you think it's the seaside communities, they get tens of thousands more people in the summer. They don't have extra resources, etc. But I would love at some point, like other mayors, to get the Police and Crime Commissioner powers. I haven't at this stage, but I'd like to get my hands on that and get back to common sense policing. But I think the policing we saw clearly in Cambridgeshire, we'd like to see that kind of straight there, tackling the issues right across the country, wouldn't we?
I think, and as well, I mean, I'm not saying that's why, but the fact is where the Cambridgeshire Police HQ was very, very close to that station, so there were a lot of armed police officers who could be there very quickly. But it's interesting, isn't it, that you're the elected mayor of Greater Lincolnshire, and I imagine your mandate is much larger than the Police and Crime Commissioner, who most people won't have heard of.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've got tens of millions of pounds, and I mean, his is a big mandate, but yeah, my skills, infrastructure, and housing, etc., transport. So I've got a lot on my plate to get my teeth into, which I am doing.
And do you have enough police officers in the community, Dame Andrea? Would you like to see more? No, you don't.
I mean, people don't feel safe. They tell me that. And as I said, Lincolnshire is seriously underfunded, and we have the other issue of rural crime and our high streets. People are still getting away with stealing things. So I think we need to go to a bit like Rudy Giuliani did, isn't it, in the US when he was mayor, where it's a zero tolerance approach, where no crime is too small to go unpunished, which is very much what Reform believe in. There's always got to be that place of consequence, because if not, people will progress to more serious crimes, won't they?
They will. And the police, we've just had Kevin Hollenrake on. I don't know if you heard him, Dame Andrea.
Yes,
he's the Tory party chairman. He actually admitted that the Tory party got it horribly wrong when Theresa May, as Home Secretary, who then became Prime Minister, cut police numbers by 20,000.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? I mean, I know in Morley I was trying to fight to save our police station because, they closed lots of community police offices down, didn't they? And I think having that local police office that you could turn up to was great, wasn't it? Because they had that more of a presence on the high street. So I think we need to go back more to that community-style policing, don't you?
Yeah, and there's near where I live in North London, they closed the police station down, I would say, probably 10, 12 years ago. The building's still sitting there, becoming more and more derelict, ramshackle and broken down. So, in other words, becoming less and less of an investment. Outrageous.
Yes. Absolutely. But I mean, that's what's happened, in my old constituency. But also, the whole justice system needs changing. I mean, we've seen with the courts, the waiting times, the whole system needs a big overhaul. And we need more prison places as well, don't we? If we want to lock these people up, we need more prison places as well.
Well, I can remember talking to one of your colleagues in Reform, Anne Widdecombe. She said when she was Prisons Minister under John Major, they commissioned a vessel, like a prison ship, and they put lots of prisoners on this ship. Why can't they do that?
I thought of that exact thing, actually. I didn't realise that being done before. No, I agree. That would be one. And let's face it, if they try escaping, they're only surrounded by water. That seems a great idea, doesn't it, really? Yeah. Yeah,
and of course, in your area, Dame Andrea Jenkins, Lincolnshire, you have a lot of migrants, and are many of them still in hotels?
Yes, it's predominantly in the coastal areas. I mean, I wrote to the Vice-Chancellor of Lincoln University because there was talks of housing migrants in one of the university campus buildings. I mean, gosh, can you imagine that with all the young students there? So, I mean, is actually rest assured that that's not going to happen now. But apparently the government are reaching out to all these institutions to see whether they can house them. But I mean, as I said, put them in tents in a confined area before the process and sent back. We don't want people who are unvetted within our community. At the moment, our community do not feel safe, Andrew. And I'm sure you see it in London as well.
And where would you put them in tents?
Well, I mean,
where would the tents be?
No, I mean, it's got to be in a confined area, isn't it? Where people can't be let out. And I think there's got to be a severe vetting, hasn't there? There's not enough vetting in my books before people are let on the street. And we've also got to stop the pull to Britain. While we are soft touch Britain, Andrew, people get freebies, then what's going to happen? It's like moths to a flame. People are going to keep coming across, aren't they?
Well, I mean, I think the French mayor of Calais, didn't she say Britain, it's too attractive a proposition? I always get into trouble if I say we're a soft touch, but you just said it.
No, we certainly are, aren't we? Yeah, it's like we've got a big sign saying, come here. You get all these freebies, isn't it? Which is very sad, and it's not right for the British people. We need to start looking after our own people. And back to the case of what happened in Huntingdon, I mean, that's only on the border of Lincolnshire. And it's... People want answers, Andrew. They want to feel safe, and they want action. This cannot happen again.
All right, that's Dame Andrea Jenkins, who is the Reform UK Mayor for Greater Lincolnshire. We're going to go back to Huntingdon. That press conference, not surprisingly, has been delayed, but the GB News national reporter Jack Carson is there. Jack, any indication of when we're going to get this press conference?
Well, we were expecting it, of course, as at 10 o'clock. About 10, 15 minutes ago, we were told it was going to be delayed for possibly around 20 minutes. So we are expecting it very shortly. And, of course, we are expecting an update, not only an update, of course, on the condition of those 10 people that were taken to hospital, 9 with what were described as life-threatening injuries, 1 with a non-life-threatening injury, but also, of course, the 2 people which were arrested by armed police and taken into custody. What is an update on them? Of course, we know that last night in the British Transport Police's statement shortly after midnight, that they confirmed that counter-terrorism police were involved in the investigation, simply because at that stage they did not know a motivation. It'll be very interesting to see whether in this press conference we are expecting soon, whether they have been able to confirm, whether they've been able to speak to those people that they arrested and took into custody. Have they been able to establish a motivation for this attack? Of course, the British Transport Police say they were called to at 7:42 p.m. last night, the train just leaving Peterborough Station, not expected to stop and arrive here in Huntingdon on its way to King's Cross. It had begun in Doncaster at 25 past 6 p.m. Yesterday. Of course, it not having to make an emergency stop here when that attack took place. Eyewitnesses reports on that train of just how horrific the attack was, just how scared the passengers were, running through each carriage as far as they could until they reached that end point where, of course, the driver was trying to get to Huntingdon as fast as possible so that the police could make that response. And, of course, they did in their numbers. They were here waiting for that train to arrive. As that train pulled into the station, of course, we got that armed response. Many of those videos posted on social media showing that armed police response. And, of course, on the back of the 999 call, the police confirmed that they had started the operation of Operation Plato. Now, that is a procedure which essentially is put in place after what is believed to be, at that stage, a marauding terrorist attack, meaning that there was a no-notice attack with a high threat to life. So that was the protocol that the police put into place. It's called Operation Plato. Of course, we are waiting to hear whether this has been designated as a terrorist attack. Of course, that will very much depend on the motivations, and as we were saying, this is what we are hoping for, some more information in this press conference as to exactly the situation on those 10 people that we know were taken to hospital, and also the 2 suspects that were taken into custody. The Chief Superintendent of the British Transport Police, Chris Casey, saying that they were conducting urgent inquiries to establish exactly what happened here yesterday as the train pulled into this station. And this morning we have seen very active signs of that investigation and those operations taking place here at Huntingdon Station. We've seen forensic officers. They have seen them lay out to what appears to be some kind of black tarpaulin over the road, and then forensic photographers taking photos of what is evidence, and they are leaving no stone unturned here. Of course, well into the night, deep into the night, we saw investigating officers and forensic officers on the train tracks themselves with torches, flashlights, looking under the train, taking pictures. That is not necessarily because there was any confirmation of anything under those trains, but they are making sure that these investigations are thorough and so to try and really work out a full picture of exactly what went on and how exactly it happened. Of course, away from here, CCTV is going to be collected to be able to be searched through religiously to try and find exactly when the attackers involved in the incident last night, when did they board the train, how did they they board the train, and of course when exactly did they start that attack. There will be many people's possessions on that train in that sheer panic of trying to run away from the attack that the police are going to be recovering, be using in their forensic evidence to establish a full picture of exactly what went on here. We've also seen forensic officers on the platform again this morning, so it's clear how active those investigations exactly are. But just the sheer response from the emergency services has been rightly praised by both local MPs and politicians alike. Of course, the police headquarters is only a couple of minutes' drive from here, so they were able to respond so quickly to the calls that they were getting in at around, as the British Transport Police said, 7:42 p.m. Last night. But also the emergency services, the East of England Ambulance Service, saying they were called just before 20 to 8 at night, and they mobilised, they say, a large-scale response. That included numerous ambulances, tactical commanders, a hazardous area response team, critical care teams as well, and this really proves the resources that were deployed to this incident last night. Air ambulances from not just here in the East Anglian region, but also from Essex and Herts and Magpass as well. So those three different areas of air ambulances were sent here in order to make sure that those people who have been described as having life-threatening injuries could be airlifted to hospital as soon as possible. And as those passengers got off that train, many of them were waiting around last night, waiting to talk to police, to give their witness statements, their eyewitness accounts, and that will all help them build up that picture of exactly what happened here. And some of that picture, we hope, will be revealed in this press conference that we are expecting shortly. Of course, the local MP here talking about how he'd had meetings with the Chief Constable of Cambridgeshire Police in the last kind of few hours or so overnight, and of course we heard those eyewitnesses as well talking about just how horrific this attack on the train last night was.
Thanks, Jack. That's Jack Carson. Well, the Conservative Mayor of Peterborough in Cambridgeshire, Paul Bristow, spoke to us a little earlier. This is what he had to say.
Today is obviously going to be a day where we will reflect on what's happened. We can talk about, how we let the public know exactly what's happened in that open and transparent way. I think that's really, really important. And we've got to learn the lessons of all this. And obviously the train was travelling in the main through Cambridgeshire. It wasn't scheduled to stop at Huntingdon. It did so because it was the right place to stop, or the quickest place to stop, to get the emergency services on the scene and of course the perpetrator arrested. But look, we have to learn the lessons of what was a truly horrific incident. Well, none of us know how we would react in these circumstances, and it seems to me that everyday people are capable of extraordinary things. And the gentleman you refer to protect a young girl like that, I mean, I hope when all things come to light that he's okay. That's the first thing, because I understand he's got injuries to his neck and his head, but hopefully he's recognised for what he did. We're all capable of extraordinary things, and none of us know how we will react in such.
So we're going live to the press conference now in Huntingdon.
It's here, good, ladies and gents. Good. Okay. Step into something closer, please, sir. About there? Good. Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Superintendent John Lovelace, and I'm here to provide you with an update on the incident at Huntingdon Station that took place here last night. It's a shocking incident, and first and foremost, my thoughts are with the family and friends of those who have been affected and those who are injured. At approximately 7:42 p.m. yesterday evening, there were calls to the police service in relation to multiple stabbings which took place on board a train service that departed Doncaster at 6:25 p.m. and was en route to London King's Cross Station. Officers immediately attended Huntingdon Station alongside paramedics, where armed police officers from Cambridgeshire Police boarded the train and arrested 2 people. Within 8 minutes of the 999 call being made, 2 men were brought into police custody, where they remain this morning. I can tell you that these are The first male, a 32-year-old male, a black British national, and a 35-year-old man, a British national of Caribbean descent. They were both arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. Both were born in the United Kingdom. As stated, they remain this morning in separate police stations for questioning. 10 people were taken to hospital by ambulance, and another person self-presented later that evening. While 9 were initially believed to have life-threatening injuries, following assessment and treatment, 4, thankful to say, have been discharged. However, 2 patients remain in a life-threatening condition. British Transport Police declared a major incident yesterday, and counter-terrorism policing were initially supporting our investigation. However, at this stage, there is nothing to suggest that this is a terrorist incident. This is a British Transport Police investigation, and we continue to work to establish at pace the full circumstances and the motivations that have led to this incident. At this early stage, it would not be appropriate to speculate on the cause of this incident. As you can see, the station this morning remains closed. However, we expect trains to be passing through the station this morning. Passengers will see a high visibility presence of police officers at stations and on trains throughout today, up and down the transport network. Our officers are there to reassure the public and to address any concerns they may have. I'd like to thank the public personally for their patience and their cooperation. Yesterday evening, which has already greatly assisted our investigation through the help the public have tendered, as well as the multi-agency response partners from colleagues in other blue light services. I'd like to extend my thanks to our colleagues within Cambridgeshire Police, the East of England Ambulance Service, Cambridgeshire Fire and Rescue Service, and counter-terrorism policing. And finally, I'd like to appeal for anyone that's watching who has information connected to yesterday's incident, however big or small you feel that may be, that has not yet spoken to police to make contact. You can do so by texting the British Transport Police on 61016, that's 61016, quoting reference 663 of the 1st of November 2025. Thank you very much. I won't be taking any more questions, but thank you very much.
Did they guess what these were?
Well, as expected, I didn't think he would take any questions, but that is breaking news. We've heard from Superintendent John Lovelace from British Transport Police. He says it is not at this stage being treated as a terrorist incident. 2 men in custody. The first one, 32-year-old black British national. The second one is 35, white man of Caribbean descent, both born in the United Kingdom. The attack, as you know, it's the 6:25 Doncaster train en route to London King's Cross. The police were alerted by a 999 call at 7:42, quite astonishing. Within 8 minutes of that 999 call, those 2 men were in custody. But just to, there were 10 people were hospitalised, 9 had life-threatening injuries. Currently now, 4 have been discharged, 2 are still with life-threatening conditions. So that's major news coming out of Huntingdon. Let's talk to Kevin Hurley, who's the former Surrey Police and Crime Commissioner. Kevin Hurley, should I say, is it wrong to say I'm relieved it's not terror-related? It's still a horrific, terrible attack that's caused terror on a train and will have horrified people the length and breadth of the land.
Well, of course, we actually don't know it's not yet terrorist related because the police have not yet said. They don't know what the motive is.
Well, they're not regarding it as a terrorist incident. Hang on, Kevin, they're saying they're not regarding it as a terrorist incident at this stage.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I'm not sure how they could form a view one way or another. If you look at the timings involved, the fact that these 2 people would have been sleeping overnight in custody, and it's still quite early to get to the bottom of it. I don't think anyone can quite say what was behind this. You know, we could conjecture perhaps it's cannabis psychosis has driven this with someone, but it's just pure conjecture. I think some interesting points out of it, and you did raise a good one there where you said it's astonishing that they were in custody within 8 minutes of the 999 call. And that really was by the grace of God, because by pure chance, the train driver stopped at Huntingdon Railway Station, where across the other side of the car park is Cambridgeshire Police Headquarters, where all the armed response units are all based. So I don't think we, from a, if you like, police deployment point of view, we can take any comfort out of that other than saying, what a piece of luck that was, because had that train have stopped perhaps the next station further down the track, it would have been most unlikely that armed officers would have been immediately available, and possibly not even tasers. And I think from my point of view, the learning of this, as is with so many of these random attacker situations, is just how vulnerable we, the public, are because of the current policy of not arming all response officers with a pistol. It's pure luck the train stopped right next door to the base of the armed response officers, who were probably, at that time of evening, eating their sandwiches next door. So let's not get too... although they did a great job, don't get me wrong. They rushed forward. But
nevertheless, Kevin, we have to be grateful that they take the luck when we get it, right? And they, of course, it struck me immediately, my God, what a relief that they were so close to the police HQ. However, those police officers then do what they do best. They run straight into the face of danger. And as you point out, some of them will have been armed, some won't have been.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And of course, for the armed officers in particular, they know that if they pull the trigger, they're probably going to end up suspended from their normal role.
Sure.
Investigated for years, potentially charged at the Old Bailey, as is happening all the time, only for good British juries of true citizens, after about 3 or 4 minutes, acquitting them. And yet again, the Independent Office of Police Complaints, which is far from independent in my judgment, then insists that they get an internal discipline hearing to still try and sack them. Yet these men and women are still prepared to rush forward and, if you like, protect the public. I think the point I'm making here is, had this have been in a shopping centre, the next railway station down the track, we might not have been so fortunate in that the first officers to turn up might have been unarmed, and with police recruitment standards as they are now, they might have been a couple of people who are 4'10", and really less than 8 stone in weight. So, we need to be realistic and say, if we, the public, want to be kept safe by all our police officers, all of the response officers should at least carry a firearm so they can act decisively to protect me and my family. And that's the point I'm making here. There's yet again that learning. And how many times do we get it? If you look at Axel Rubicana up in Southport, we are very fortunate that 2 brave unarmed men, assisted by an unarmed male community support officer, decided to take someone on who was already murdering people instead of wait for the armed response officers. We should not be in that position as a society that we are relying on unarmed people to go forward and protect us against people who carry deadly weapons. There have been countless places now up and down the country, Andrew, if I may, where incidents have occurred where police could have stopped them more decisively if the police were routinely armed with handguns.
That, of course, that's a political matter, isn't it? Because if every response officer is to be armed, Kevin, does that need legislation, or is that merely a decision taken between the Home Secretary and Chief Constables? How does it work?
Yeah, exactly what you said, the latter there, Andrew. It's just a decision politically and with Chief Constables to say, right, arm them all. Because, of course, along with Iceland and Southern Ireland, we are the only country in the world where our responding police do not routinely carry arms. Even sleepy South Island of New Zealand, they carry rifles and pistols in all the response vehicles. And I kind of look at it and think, so how many more times do we need to have the London Bridge attackers, the Fishmongers Hall attackers, where whilst unarmed police are unable to deal with it, these people go on to maim and murder people's relatives? Because if you think back the learning of a similar type of knife attack at London Bridge where 3 people ran amok into Borough Market. It was one lone brave Transport Police constable who took all 3 of them on and delayed them for probably 30 seconds, received serious injury, which enabled enough time for a nearby City of London Police armed response vehicle to come over the bridge from the city into the Met area and shoot these people. We're getting by the skin of our teeth nearly in all of these different incidents, and people need to wake up and smell the coffee. Unarmed police either end up like they did with the man with the samurai sword recently at Hainault, who killed the 14-year-old schoolboy with her arm nearly chopped off and seriously injured and probably not able to carry on with normal police duty, or we end up with more and more innocent members of the public being killed. There's just so many incidents. I could sit here all day and list them for you of situations where unarmed police have not been able to protect the public against people with deadly threats. And that's why, again, Andrew, I'm majoring on this. We were lucky, but let's not get carried away. By pure chance, they stopped right next door to where the armed response people were probably in having their tea.
Absolutely. On that point, Kevin Hurley, he's the former Surrey Police and Crime Commissioner. Well, let's go back to Huntingdon. Just to remind you, we've had that press conference with Superintendent John Lovelace from British Transport Police, who says it is an ongoing major incident, but the police currently are not regarding it as a terrorist incident. Both men who are in custody were born in the United Kingdom. Let's go back to Jack Carson. Jack.
Yeah, let's take you through the details that we got in the press conference. Of course, we were speaking 20 or so minutes ago, Andrew, talking about the vacuum that was being created and really the police needing to update us both on the suspects that they'd taken into custody and on those that had been injured in this horrible attack. So let's just take you through some of the things that Superintendent John Lovelace said in that press conference. He said that within 8 minutes of the 999 call, which we know was made at 7:42 p.m. to police yesterday, they said that within the 8 minutes of that 999 call, 2 men were in police custody, confirming, as you just said, they were a 32-year-old male, a black British national, and a 35-year-old male, a British national of Caribbean descent. He added they were both born in the UK and both have been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. And some positive news on some of the people that were taken to hospital yesterday. We've been speaking all morning, haven't we, about the huge response from the emergency services, particularly from the East of England ambulance service, and bringing in air ambulances from other regions across the country in order to get those people that were obviously in a critical condition to hospital so soon. He said in that press conference, Superintendent John Lovelace, that of the 9 people thought to have life-threatening injuries, 4 have been discharged and 2 remain in a life-threatening condition. We know that there is a 10th who had been admitted to hospital with a non-life-threatening injury, and also he confirmed that at a later point yesterday evening there was a further person admitted to hospital. Superintendent John Lovelace added, as you were saying, there is nothing, he says, to suggest at this time this is a terrorist incident, but they say they continue to work at pace to establish the full circumstances and motivations that have led to this incident. We have seen that work at pace with forensic investigations very active here on scene, taking photos, gathering evidence so that the police can build that full picture.
All right, Jack, that's Jack Carson. Well, thank you so much all for watching me, Andrew Pearce, today in for Camilla Tominey. A bleak day, but mercifully the 9 seriously people with life-threatening injuries now down to 2. Now, Michael Patillo is up next on GB News for continued reaction to today's press conference. Just to remind you, both suspects who are in prison, who are in custody, are British-born. Let's go now to the weather.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello there, this is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. Many of us will actually get a decent dose of sunshine over the course